Department of Transportation. I don't know if you hear that or not, or get a message that I just started the recording, but we do like to record these meetings, and that way, if you have a neighbor or someone that wasn't able to join us tonight, you'll have access to that. I'll describe more of that here in just a little bit. Before I get started, I see Councilmember Prepton on the line. Appreciate you joining, Councilman. And is there anything you would like to say to the group before we get going here?
Yeah, so just wanted to say again, thank you everybody for taking the time out of your evening to participate in this meeting. I know these meetings are really crucial, not only for just getting the information out to folks to know sort of what traffic calming will mean for your specific street, but I appreciate everybody participating in this process and specifically initiating this process with NDOT of getting in your request for traffic calming to make sure that we're really making sure that we're taking care of our streets, taking care of our communities, and making sure that we're making our streets safer for everybody. So thank you all very much, and thank you, Jeff, for putting all this together and getting the information out.
Absolutely, we appreciate your support and that of all of our council members, and helping to make this project, this program work. That's a great lead into what we'll be talking about tonight. A little bit of housekeeping here. I've already mentioned the recording. The second thing I'll mention is that you do have the ability. These tend to be pretty small groups here, and looks like tonight's no exception, although good attendance. But you do have the ability to unmute yourself. I'd invite you to do that as we go through these slides. We'll pretend like it's just like it's an in-person meeting. Feel free to just stop me if you have a question or a comment about anything that I have to talk about. And the last thing I will say is that just kind of give you an overview of tonight's meeting. We'll do three major things. One is we'll give you a little bit of that background about the traffic calming program in Metro and how Grandview got inducted into it. The second thing we'll do is look at a very preliminary concept about what we think traffic calming might look like on your street. And then the last thing is we'll give you set some expectations for what you should expect from us, and some timelines and next steps and things like that. And, as far as where do we go from here. With that, we will get started. Just a little bit about traffic calming. By this point, most people, when we roll these meetings out, they kind of know what the traffic calming program is all about. We do focus on residential areas. We do focus on speed reduction. That seems obvious, but sometimes people will engage us and ask, hey, can we move some of this traffic off our street? We don't try to do that. We try to focus on just getting people to drive a little more responsibly in those residential areas that we have. And we do that largely by focusing on physical solutions. We have found that nothing slows traffic down quite as effectively as putting something in the street that drivers have to drive over or drive around, and that seems to give us the best results. We do have a few other tools that we'll talk about tonight, but it's really where we focus. We also recognize that we're not the only game in town, not the only player in this issue of speeding in neighborhoods. We've got great partnerships with MMPD and their enforcement group. There's just not enough of them. The resources there at the police department are stretched pretty thin, and we all agree they're out there doing very important work every day. And parking a cruiser there and writing tickets is not something that's always at the top of their list, understandably so. But they are supporters of the program and partners with what we do. But enforcement is a big part of speed management as well. Education can be also, and NDOT is currently putting out some messages there to try to reinforce the importance of safe speeds, and we've got some tools to that effect in our program as well that we'll look at. One of the data points that we like to point to about why this is such an important program and important issue with NDOT is the safety aspect of it. And so infographics like this kind of really hit home the idea that, especially in neighborhoods where we have people that are out walking, whether it's to go to school or just out enjoying an evening or whatever, that it's not only a quality of life issue, but it can be a real safety issue as well. And so we've tried to slow traffic down where that has been requested, largely on the fact that there are different types of street users. And when you're a pedestrian walking in a place that in Nashville at least, largely does not have sidewalks, then speed can be a really dangerous situation from a survivability standpoint. And we also like to remind folks or educate folks that this continues to be a very much of an in-demand service of Metro government. In this latest cohort where Grandview was selected, we had almost 500 other applications. A lot of those are carryovers, but they're projects that have been requested that we just haven't been able to get to. And we say that just to say that as bad as things may seem, you're kind of in good company. That's not a great thing to have to say, but there is a lot of demand for something to be done on neighborhood streets where it's at least perceived that speeding is a real issue. To put that in perspective, we're able to counter that with about 50 projects a year. This being one of those, we do that in 2 different application periods of 25 streets each. And I'll show you how we get to that here in just a second, how we select those. But we do always like to remind folks of Hub Nashville. And if you're out, you see something that maybe we're not going to be able to address with a traffic calming issue, or maybe it's even more severe. There's a stop sign that has gone missing, or a traffic light is burnt out, or whatever. Those types of things can always be addressed through hub.nashville.gov, and we encourage you to do that. It's hub.nashville.gov, and it's a great resource if you're not familiar with it. It's really a clearinghouse for all things Metro government requests that you have. You can also just pick up the phone, call 311, and there are operators there to take that information, and they can get those requests to the appropriate personnel, not just at NDOT, but pretty much every Metro department is represented there at Hub Nashville.
Real quick, 2 slides ago, there was a number of projects. So yeah, 25 neighborhood streets in fall 2024. Does that mean Grandview Drive was one of those, or we're now in the queue for a future selection?
You are one of those.
Cool.
That's a good clarifying point. This street has been selected for a project. Now, what we like to say is at this point, it's kind of in your hands. I'll describe that, but yeah, it's funded. It's there. If you choose to avail yourself of it, we're here as a resource to help build this project along with you. So that's
great.
What we're doing
Thanks.
Tonight.
Hey, Jeff, Josh Hobson here. Another clarifying question, just to confirm, both sides of Grandview. So Grandview being between Belmont and Granny White, and the side between Granny White and Leland, correct?
No, that's not quite correct. It is just the westernmost segment. I'll show you a close-up of that in just a second. We'll look at the limits of it. But those are 2 different applications, and they're 2 different kind of independent sections, and we collect the data independently, and that has been selected independently. Same as what has happened on Gray Bar. It's very similar in that it's broken up into these different segments. So what we're talking about tonight is just Belmont to Granny White, and I'll show you that. Before we do, I'll just describe how we got to that, how we get to those decisions. All of those applications that come in are for a segment, and we go out and we collect data for every one of those. And the lion's share of the data, 70% of the scoring system that we use, you see it here in this pie chart, is made up of that data like you would expect. It's the volume of traffic on the street and how fast it's going. The other 30% has to do with some of those other issues. Are there other accommodations like sidewalks or like transit service? If you don't have sidewalks, as you all don't, your score goes up. So that helps you in this selection. We also look at, are there places that might make a walking trip more likely, like schools, parks, libraries, etc. And then lastly, we have some points dedicated toward, is there an actual instance of a pedestrian injury or fatality on the street? So we take all that data, roll that up into a composite score, and basically just go 1 through 25. And Grandview is in that process, is in that set of projects. And that's how we got here. Here's some of the data specific to the street. And you see there the limits of Belmont to Granny White. I'm going to show you a map on this next slide. And the data that we collected for Grandview was has a 85th percentile speed of 35 miles an hour. That's just a statistical way that our industry looks at speeding data. What it basically says is that 15% of the traffic is going faster than 35. Just about everybody's been on one of these streets and say, you know, there's a guy that's got to be going 55 or 60 miles an hour. Everybody's got a story like that, and that may well be true. All we're saying here is that we know there's an appreciable amount of traffic that's going faster than 35. It's got just under 1,200 vehicles a day. That sounds like a lot. That is a healthy amount of traffic, but it's nowhere near the upper limit. We'll deal with streets like this up to about 5,000 cars a day doing this type of traffic calming. So we're well within the thresholds of where we're comfortable doing a project like this. It's a pretty narrow street at 20 feet. That's not unusual for streets in Metro, but it's on the narrow side. I am aware that along the way, some of the properties have kind of makeshift parking areas that sort of widen the project in places, and then people park in those. And so that will be something that we'll be taking a look at as we get into more detailed design of a potential project. And then the last thing is the length. It's about 4/10 of a mile long, which is pretty average for the segments of streets that we work with in the program. Here is, I know this is small. This is a screenshot of an interactive map that's on the NDOT traffic calming webpage. And so at the end, I'll give you a link to that if you don't know how to get to that already. It's a pretty neat tool. You can go all over the county, but the real benefit here is these color-coded lines. And so you see the big arrows pointing to your street, Grandview. It's kind of a pea-colored line there running parallel and just south of Gray Bar. And you begin to see here what was mentioned there a minute ago about different segments. And so the green one is what we're looking at. That's the segment that has been selected in this go-round of traffic calming. And so, of course, we're running from Belmont to Granny White. On the east side of Granny White, there's another segment of Grandview. It has an application in. That's what the purple line means, that has an application, but it has not yet been selected for traffic calming. Interestingly, Gray Bar is identical. We did the section of Gray Bar on the west side of Belmont a couple of rounds ago. I'm not sure if that's been installed or not. Y'all would know. I think it is, and I see Councilman nodding his head. So that's already in. Wednesday night, we have the meeting for the Gray Bar that's just parallel to you all. And then they have another segment too, also that has been requested, but has not yet been selected. So anyway, you begin to see what the colors mean. The blue ones is that it's waiting on its queue. There are some blue dotted lines. I don't see any here, but that's indicates a place where there's already been an installation. So this map can be helpful if you're curious as to what has been applied for or where these speed cushions have already been installed. That might be helpful to you. All right, a little bit about the tools. I think people, like I said, are becoming more and more familiar with it. I won't spend a lot of time here. I know, especially with that other section of Gray Bar having been installed, you're familiar with our speed cushions. These are from the same vendor every time, which is nice because when we talk about it, we're talking about the exact same product that is near y'all. They're on, let's see, Oriole and Overhill and Castleman, and I know there's several streets that have been installed fairly near you all. So I'm sure encountered these. They do come in different configurations. They're all 6 feet wide, but we can lengthen them just based on how aggressive we want to be. The shorter they are, the more aggressive and they are, which tends to result in a slower speed over them. We can lengthen those by putting some flat pieces in between, like you might see in the lower left-hand picture there, up to 14 feet long. That's the least or the most gradual, and so the least speed slowing option that we have. The other design treatment that we have is to be able to spread those out, and so sometimes you see sets of 2 cushions, sometimes 3. We've done more than that. with the idea just being that we want to make sure that the speed cushions are spread out from pavement edge to pavement edge, just to make sure that people can't drive around these. We have learned over the years that if we give any room at all, people will do that. And so the other thing that we'll do is use our signage. You see in the upper left-hand picture, those big steel signs. Nobody wants to drive through one of those. So that does a pretty good job of protecting those edges. And then other times we'll use those flexible delineators like you might see in the bottom right. In this case, with a street as narrow as it is, I don't think we'll have any real issue. We won't need anything any wider than 2 cushions, assuming we can work within those built-out parking areas that we've talked about. So we'll cross that bridge if we get to it, but I don't think we'll have any issue with a potential layout there. The treatment that's a very close cousin to the speed cushion is the speed table. It's same vendor, same material, rides about the same. It just it is one continuous piece all the way across. You may be familiar. Some of these were installed in front of Sevier Park down there on Leland Lane, maybe a year or so ago. We don't use these very often because, and I didn't mention, but the reason they have those gaps in between them on the speed cushion is to facilitate emergency vehicle response. So ambulances and fire trucks, which have a wider wheelbase, they can't totally straddle them, but they can get closer. And so they're not as impacted by the speed cushions as they are with the speed table. So this is kind of a special one that's usually reserved for some unique conditions. We just don't use it nearly as often. We do have some before and after data. I always caution folks, it's hard to make a guess about what the speed characteristics are going to be at the end of the project. Every project's a little different, and speeds are starting at a different level, but we're seeing pretty good results in the order of 9 or 11 miles an hour different between the before and after case. But most people, if you just drive on one of our streets, you see pretty quickly that they are effective, and and they continue to work over a period of time. They really don't lose effectiveness like some of our other tools might. Like this one, some people at least say this one tends to lose effectiveness. Other people will put a feedback sign in the neighborhood, and they will swear by it and say it has absolutely changed the street and it works wonders. So it is a good tool. We usually reserve the feedback sign when we can't do something like a speed cushion. Maybe there's too many driveways, or there's too much traffic, or there's steep hills. We have thresholds for that, or sharp curves. We don't put them on. So sometimes we'll supplement with a feedback sign. You've seen these as well, I'm sure. There is I guess it's at least a philosophy. There probably is some data backing it up, but which says if a driver has a very wide field of vision and the street appears to be very wide, then there's a higher tendency that they're going to go fast. And so one of the tools that we will use sometimes is to introduce pavement markings to visually narrow the street and put those lines a little closer together. You guys are already starting with a pretty narrow street, plus I think you have a pretty good amount of on-street parking as well. And so that all of that tends to work in your favor in terms of keeping streets slow. And so this may not be a tool that's would do much good, but it is something that we keep in the toolbox there. And then in more urban areas, we take it a step further, especially when intersections are kind of the culprit. Some of our intersections in Nashville were built really wide with big sweeping radiuses. And then when you have a lot of pedestrians in the area, it all just kind of begs for some treatment to be narrowed up. And so we call those bulb outs, where we basically redraw an intersection, but don't do it in concrete. We do it more in paint and delineators. But again, most of the time, that's more of an urban treatment than what we're talking about here. But even a little more specialized, there's only a couple of these in Davidson County, is the chicane. It introduces an artificial meandering of the street, again, using pavement markings. That can be a good option for a wider street. And then the last one is traffic circles. And again, it's not a tool we use very often. It has some a lot of times some complicating function for big vehicles like school buses, and so we are very judicious in our use of traffic circles, and they really only fit where we just have great big intersections anyway. So I will show you a look at what we would think our first stab at what a traffic calming project would look like on Grandview, and this honestly looks like 95% of the projects that we will introduce into a neighborhood, but we're very interested here in your feedback. And let me just describe what we're looking at here. The solid purple line on the bottom is your street. You see the stop sign there at Belmont on the left-hand side of the picture, and the stop sign at the other end of the street on Granny White on the right-hand side of the picture. And then in between that, there are 3 sets of speed cushions. That's not just one of those cushions, that's a set. So there would be 2 speed cushions, most likely, at each of those locations. The way we come up with 3 is that we will look at the total length of the road. In this case, it's just over 2,000 feet from one end to the other. And then we'll divide that distance by what we know to be a good and effective spacing. The spacing that we typically shoot for is somewhere around 400 to 600 feet. That's close enough together that cars typically won't clear one set of speed cushions and then step on the gas just to fly up to the next one before braking again. But it's far enough apart that we hope it's not totally obnoxious for those of you who have to drive across it every day, or that it would push traffic to some other street. It tends to provide just a good, steady, slow speed of 25 miles an hour or so over the length of the street that we're trying to treat. So in this case, we take that 2,000 and divide it. It just so happens that if we put 3 speed cushions, those will be spaced by an average distance of right at 500, just about exactly in the middle of our range. So we feel like that's good on this street. Sometimes if it's much more urban, we'll go closer together. If it's more on a rural section, we may spread that a little further apart. But we think in this case, that gives us a good result. I will caveat it with one of the thresholds. I mentioned steep, I've mentioned slopes, which we don't really have here. Obviously, we don't have any curves. But we do remain cognizant of driveways. Our rule of thumb is we want to maintain a gap between any driveways, a separation distance between any driveways of at least 15 feet. There's a lot of driveways on that north side. You can see those here. So that might present a little bit of a challenge. I think we can get these in there. But anyway, that would be the only thing that I would caveat on that. The dotted line on Gray Bar that you see just north there, I just put that on there just so that you know that is another project that's under consideration. Not a done deal. That will be in the hands of that neighborhood. Again, we meet later this week with them, but I wanted you to be aware that is another project in this cohort as well. I've talked a lot with that. This is where I love to get some feedback from you as we're talking through this project and get your thoughts of does this meet your expectations, not what you were hoping to see? What are your thoughts about this?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate the information, the presentation. It looks great and very informative. I think for me and my wife, this is exactly what we were hoping to see. Because we are concerned about the speeding on the street, and we have two little girls and a dog. Yeah, and it's just there's a lot of traffic, especially when school's in session at Lipscomb Academy and the university as well. And there's a lot of teenagers driving down the street speeding, trying to get to school early in the morning and in the afternoon. So I think this will be helpful. And I don't really have any critiques. I just, I'm curious about what the next steps are, I guess, with something like this, and what the timeline is for implementing it, assuming other neighbors are also in support.
Okay, great. We'll cover that in just a second here. Anybody else?
I'll jump in and I'll agree with the Hughes family, kind of a similar situation. I'm on the east side of Granny White, and so don't need to go down that rabbit hole right now. I know you probably got to finish up, but I would advocate for exactly the same thing on the east side. And I know there were reasons why the west side was selected, but not the east side. But I'll give you some more detail later. But I've got email traffic going back to 2021 on some data collection measures that were done on the east side. But either the thing didn't work for the week, and that was one in April of 2021, and then as of March this year, another data collection / speed display thing was deployed during the week of spring break. So like not representative data of what a normal period of concern for the east side. So I would just recommend that the east side gets considered in the same light. And if the data is different, I can show you why, is because there were some collection methods and timings that like did not accurately represent kind of the east side of the street. So again, not to derail this down the east side of the street, but I want to throw that out there while the floor is open here.
Yeah, sure. I will, here in a few slides, I'll put my email address up there. Feel free to send me any of that information that you have, and we'll look at that and pass that on to NDOT.
Will do.
Like Craig, Josh Hobson here. Like Craig, I am on the east side of that as well. So, second all the feedback he said. We're new to this street, been here about 6 months, and it's been disturbing, I guess you'd say, that the speed rate that people are driving down the street 50, 60 miles an hour in the afternoons leaving school. So that's kind of nuts. But again, same as Craig, I won't derail that further.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry.
Gore here. I'm on the east side as well. So I just want to ditto everything that Craig and Josh said as well. I was surprised to get this invitation to the meeting and so hoping that it would involve us as well. I'm tickled for the west side that they're getting it. But the traffic that we bear because of Maplehurst, the football field, being so close to us, and on the corner of our Grandview is the Granny White Church of Christ parking lot, which the high school students use. And the speeding on our street is horrendous, like many, many streets. But I've lived here for 34 years, and I've seen a horrible situation just get worse. So I'd like to know what the data is in comparison to the east and the west. And just hope that we can get in this position soon. Thank you for your time.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, anybody, if you will, just email me and I put that up, and I'll be glad to get that data for you. We'll take a look at that for sure. I'll go ahead and move into what our next steps are, but I can easily come back, be happy to do it to this slide if there are comments or questions or anything about the concept that we've got for you. Where we go from tonight, if there's consensus on the plan that we're looking at here, the next steps would be that we move into design. So we're at the neighborhood meeting, the red circle right now. We would move into the design phase where we actually come out. We've not been on site for what you just saw. We've got a pretty good feel for the street. I'm familiar with it. I've been around near there for a long time, but we'll come out and actually do field measurements and really nail those locations down and put those on a set of actual design plans, which we will make available to you. Those will go on NDOT's website. And at that point, we kind of have a decision. We're happy to come back to you and we can go look at those and go through those together. We used to require that in the program. There were 2 meetings which were mandatory, but we were finding that at that second meeting, 90% of the time people are like, yep, this is exactly what you showed us last time, and I wish you'd just use that time to kind of move the process ahead. So we make that optional if there's disagreement or some discrepancy or something you want to look at different and we need to come back, we're happy to do that. But a lot of times people say, no, this is what we want, just go ahead and design it and then post it for us. And once we post it, if we decide not to have that meeting, we'll go straight into the ballot process, which I'll talk about. That by itself is a 6-week period. We ask for 2 months to do the design. We probably don't need that much time, and then we move into the ballot, which is roughly another 2 months. At that point, the waiting game really begins. So there was a question about construction time frame, and right now, just our backlog the way it is, projects if they pass the ballot, those projects are typically taking somewhere around 8 to 10 months. Now, I think they've gotten a little quicker lately. NDOT has really they know this is an issue, and various council members have really been on them to fix this issue. And I think they've made some great strides. They've been able to bring on another contractor, and I think they've cut that down pretty substantially. It could even be as short as 4 or 6 months to get to that construction phase. But I say that so that you're not expecting, by St. Patrick's Day or something, these will be out there. That's not going to be the case. So, it could be another, fairly decent wait even after the ballot process. And along those lines, the way that works is once those plans are posted online, we will send out cards like you may have received for this meeting. They'll be a little bit different. They'll have a QR code that actually takes you to a kind of a set aside Nashville.gov ballot website. You can also just key that in, or you can also call and talk to one of the folks there at NDOT. They can log that vote for you, but you just give it some basic information, tell us your name and address, and are you for the project or not? And we keep that open, like I said, for 6 weeks. And at the end of that time, we'll tally those results. And if 2/3 of the people have voted in favor of it, we'll move the project forward. If not, we won't, or we'll retool a little bit and just do a traffic calming plan that doesn't include the speed cushions, is what we usually do. The people that get the opportunity to vote, this little graphic here is maybe not as helpful as it could be. I was trying to highlight the streets, but with Lipscomb's property there, it kind of throws things off. We will ballot every property owner from one end of the project to the other that owns property that abuts the right of way of our segment. So it's basically anybody with a frontage on Grandview. Now, I realize that Lipscomb's a huge property owner there at the corner. I think they might own some of the houses there along the street. But in any case, even if that's not true, we only allow 1 vote per owner. So if Lipscomb did own, a whole bunch of those, they would only get 1 vote, the same as any other resident. You see on your streets, you've got a couple of horizontal properties, just meaning that there is more than 1 property owner per parcel. That's those little boxes that you see 2 by 2 there. In that case, both owners of the dwellings there will get a vote. They own property in common, which does abut the property, so we give both of them the opportunity to vote. I don't think you have any commercial properties or anything. I don't think any of these are vacant, so none of that really applies. But so we will send one of those, and again, it is to the owner. It's not necessarily the resident. If there are rentals, that will go to the owner on record there with Metro. Any questions about the ballot process? Any of that? Okay. Well, I told you I'd give you my email address. That's me. I'm Jeff. I'm the one in green. That's Jeff Hammond at birchtransportation.com. You also see there the NDOT TrafficCalming.Nashville.gov. That's a generic email address, but that's because there are several project managers there in NDOT who all have access to that. So rest assured they're reading those. So if you reach out to me or the NDOT one or both, your comments or questions will be seen. We'll try to get an answer to you as quickly as we can. And so, yeah, if there's anything about that other segment or data you want to provide or anything like that, feel free to send that along. Last thing I have is just a link to that Nashville Traffic Calming webpage if you're interested in that. There's a lot of resources on there. That map that I showed you is on there. You can see the results of all of the neighborhoods that have gone to ballot, how many passed, how many did not. All of that's there. All of the design plans are located there. This meeting, a recording of this meeting will be put there as well. Give them, I don't know, 3 or 4 days, Monday, surely by the end of the week, it should be posted up there, and then feel free to share that with other neighbors. I'll put my contact back up. Any questions? That's all I have to present, but be glad to talk more if there's any other questions about the proposal.
Does the east side of Grandview Drive need to reapply for anything for consideration, or is it still in a pending status?
I will check. Most likely it's a pending status because it was on the map. It's still coded as a pending application, just hasn't been selected. There is typically talk, because we carry such a big backlog, as you saw, 500 segments. There's always been talk about rolling those off. I don't think we've ever actually done that. So it continues to be evaluated every time. I know it's not rolled off yet. But yeah, that's where it stands. And we can even give you like, how far down the list are you? We're doing 25 of these projects. If you're number 37, you're doing pretty good. But if you're at number, 312, it may be a while. And so we can tell you that information.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Stephanie mentioned she's been waiting 30 plus years, so I'm not going to squabble over a few months. But yeah. So yeah, if there's a data-based reason that the east side was not selected, I would love to advocate for a new data collection because, like I said, I've got email traffic experience and how those didn't really represent. But in kind of the interim, until that gets sorted out, and Councilman Prep, this is kind of aimed at you as well. But if there's a enforcement tactic available here, I would recommend that every 2 to 4 weeks at most, like a cop on the corner of Grandview and Ackerman, or even Lipscomb campus security, just post it up there for 45 minutes, one day, every 2 to 4 weeks. I believe that would make an impact. And so while the engineering side gets worked through and the whole process plays out on the east side, that would be a welcome intervention of some sort. And like I said, I don't think it'll take much to send the message. One car posted up once a month ish at the corner, I think would go a long ways.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add to that. Sorry, this is Stephanie, Craig. I'm going to add to that time-wise. Coming at lunchtime does no good because there's usually not any traffic most of the time around noon. But if you come in the morning, starting anywhere before 7 o'clock in the morning, and if you come anywhere in the afternoon, starting at 2:10 until about 4 o'clock, you're going to see a steady stream of that's just school kids and parents coming and going from getting their school kids. Doesn't even include afternoon traffic that in morning that we're getting from people that use us as a cut through to get to their offices and stuff like that.
And she brings that up because that's exactly what happened. I think the last time they hung out over lunch, and it was
that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And I can appreciate that feedback, and thank you all for that, because we've been, like, folks on council, we've been in continued conversation with MNPD about traffic enforcement, sort of like what the traffic enforcement unit looks like per precinct, and how to get sort of some increased enforcement in certain areas and some hot spots. Like, so even just last week, myself and some folks in the minority caucus met with some commanders with MNPD about this specific issue. So it's something that we're actively working on.
Thank you.
This is probably a dumb question, but any impact from the transportation plan that was approved to the timeline or anything like that?
No, not that I can think of. I'm trying to think. I mean, not specific to this street for sure. I can't think of any of we call it chime, the choose how you move, that I can't think of any of the chime projects that, get this far down into neighborhoods aside from, where transit service currently is. So no, it's not going to speed it up or slow it down.
Okay.
That's correct.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate your time.
Well, thank you all. We certainly appreciate the interest here. It's a good group for a relatively small number of properties, relative to what we typically see. So we really appreciate your interest in the project and program and your good feedback. With that, we'll go ahead and sign off and let you know, I guess the next thing you'll hear from us, unless you email me and look for a response for something, we'll let you know when those are posted and when that ballot process is open. In the meantime, be safe. Thanks for joining. Happy holidays to everyone, and talk to you soon.
Thank you. Be safe, everybody.
Thanks so much.